Now, I love it. We raised our family here, and I'm a big booster of it. Hmm.
When you first arrived, where did you live? Where did you
We,
find housing?
well, we got a. My first housing was a dorm for about 3 months, and then we moved into a B house, which was a duplex,
Hmm.
and we lived in right across from Lewis and Clark School here in Richland. And we lived in there for, oh gosh, a year or two. And then they sold the houses here, and I was a fellow that I worked with down here. He didn't want to stay here, so he was living in a ranch house, which I bought, and I'm still there. And we live on Torbit here in Richland, and I've been here ever since. We had one child that was born in Denver, and then our other three, and we finally had a girl, which I was so happy for. I love girls.
Do you
And
remember?
she lives here, by the way,
Okay.
and she's the only one that lives here. And she's a special education teacher, for the handicap, at Richland School. That's what she got her degree in, and she loves the work. But I couldn't do it.
Do you remember how much you paid for that house in 1950?
We paid about 6,500. 6,500. Yeah, we sure did. And prior to that, they furnished the oil, the painters, everything was done for us. Hmm.
Do you remember what your rent was on the B house?
Yeah, it was about $30 a month.
30,000.
Yeah. Hmm.
Do you have any other memories of the community in the 1950s? What it was like at the time?
Well, yeah, somewhat. One of the things that mystified me was that we lived in Richland, but blacks could not live in Kennewick. They would not rent. Well, you couldn't buy a house in Kennewick if you were black, and that always I thought was unreasonable because we had several blacks that worked with us in the AEC here that were wonderful, and I still don't have any. I love them. Oh, I like everybody.
So when you were AEC, there were there had already been hiring of African Americans there.
No, they hired them. Oh yeah, AEC. There was no question on that with the government. But boy, you couldn't live here when we had several blacks in our division, and it worked out great.
Um,
No, the community. Do you live? I mean, do you folks live here? Well, when we got here, there was nothing north of Van Giesen. Nothing. There was, and so boy, did we see that grow.
yeah, I imagine you've seen a lot of
Yeah.
change and growth.
The week we got here, well, let's see, it was about. I lived here for about maybe 3 months in a dorm until we got housing for my wife in that B house, and it was great to get that housing.
Yeah. What was the dorm like?
I didn't have any problem. Of course, I missed my family. We had a boy at that time living in Colorado, and he now lives in Snohomish. But it was, and again, we had the big army camp in North Richland where we had just thousands of trailers, and everything, and that was quite a sight to see. Hmm.
So you said when your first job was working for the health department or public health?
Well, it was the health and safety. Yes, it was. It wasn't the health department that time, but it included their functions.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what sorts of things, that first job, what sorts of things did you do? Were you...
Well, we used to do all kinds of inspections, of course, But restaurants, schools, uh, the water department in Richland, you know, just broad health things that require health overviews.
Mm-hmm.
So that was
But
tough.
you're working for GE, right?
Yes.
About how many people were working for health at that time?
Oh, we probably had 20 or 25. 25. We had a doctor that was in charge of us.
And then you said you went into radiation protection, right?
Yes, from that function.
Okay.
And the main reason is because GE went to a community rather than being GE managed. It went to we had to elect city councilman. It was a city.
Do you remember what your thoughts were about that? About it, Richland becoming an independent city at the time, or?
No, I think we all accepted it. You know, it was good. You know, obviously, when you work like that, you're interested in benefits, and I think that swayed a lot of it for me to stay with GE.
Right. So when you moved to radiation protection, then you said you had to have a lot of training at that point.
Oh yeah.
And did you have to, for the jobs you were doing, did you have to wear sort of special protective clothing at all? Or?
Oh yes.
And could you describe that? Sort of what sorts of things you had to wear?
Well, basically they're just white coveralls is the one here, and they're still using the same white coveralls out there, just like we did. Yeah.
How about security at Hanford? What was that like when you first came in there?
Well, I think it was very tight. It was very tight. They really stressed security and safety. Safety was, in my estimation, my experience, General Electric was the best contractor I ever worked for in my life, because they had emphasis on safety and health and really stressed it, you know, and much better than possibly they did in later years.
So was there sort of ongoing sort of training?
Oh yes.
For safety and.
Yeah, every very GE was very safety conscious, and and they were so good to their employees. You never read anything about anything happening in the newspaper or anything like that. They got it to their employees right away, and it was a pleasure, and the rest was a pleasure too, but not like ever. I miss GE.
And you talked about, was it the 558 project?
Yeah.
With changing the tubing, and so what was your job? I know you went to each different reactor as they did that. What sort of things were you doing for that?
My particular job was I was the what they called the radiation supervisor, and so I had about 8 radiation monitors with me all the time during each outage, and we went from one to the other, and their job was everything had to be monitored just like they do now, in and out of the areas, and move it and take it to disposal areas and everything.
So is it monitoring the employees and exposure rates, or is it?
Yes, monitoring the employees and the jobs that they're doing, because we had to develop the radiation work procedures which they were working at, and this would vary from during the whole outage, and they were very tight at first, and there was any grinding or anything or heat or anything. You had to have special requirements for that.
So of the different jobs you had and the different parts of the site that you worked at, was there a job or something you did that you found sort of the most challenging, and or something that was the most rewarding of the things you did at Hanford?
Well, probably the most rewarding job I ever had here was Hanford. I was here with Richland Operations Office, and during the Americium accident in 1955, I think it was, and my job at that time was, as a matter of fact, I got involved in that particular incident at about 5 o'clock in the morning after it happened at 4. And I went out with the doctor, a fellow by the name of Dr. Breitenstein, and he and I went out and met Mr. McCluskey out in the area before they got him into the decontamination center. And my job was really, I represented RL in the whole aspect of the care of that patient during the months and months that he was here.
Okay.
Because he was confined, couldn't leave and everything. And my job was to, matter of fact, I came out to see him every single morning that he was in there, and we became very, 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 very good friends. And it turned out I was a pallbearer for him when he died.
Wow.
And it was a rewarding experience because, well, to begin with, he was such a great guy, and he accepted all of this and was never, down. But he couldn't hardly see. He was grossly contaminated, and my job was to keep people at RL down here, the Richland Operations Office, informed of what the situation was with him, and to notify headquarters, keep them informed of it, because it was a real significant accident. The worst we've ever had at Hanford.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that he had suffered problems with his vision. What other sort of injuries or?
Well, what happened? He had put his hand in this glove box out in 2345 building, and it exploded and came out and hit him in the face, and so he was just so grossly contaminated. And he had to have a radiation monitor with him every hour that he was down there. And I became so familiar with that accident and everything and I felt it was the most rewarding for me to have something like that to do. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember about how long he had to stay hospitalized?
Yes, he was down there for probably a year.
Wow.
Year. Mm-hmm. We got hot food was provided to him by Cadillac Hospital down here, and he had a nurse with him down there at all times. Mm-hmm. And his wife was living down there with him also.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And where was he then? Where was he? Was he at the hospital, or was he?
Well, there was a facility back of Cadillac Hospital, which is no longer there. Okay. And this facility was called the Emergency Decontamination Center, and he was there. They had beds and everything in there, showers and everything, and it was a specific facility for that case, to tell you the truth. Mm-hmm. And it's since been torn down, which I think was a mistake myself. Because if you ever had another one, you couldn't have been a better facility for it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned you came close with him and was pallbearer at his funeral. Mm-hmm. How long did he live?
He lived about, I think, about 3 years. And then he died of a heart attack. It wasn't radiation. Oh. Mm-hmm. But he certainly had radiation in him that would cause cancer if he had lived too much longer. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other incidents or sort of unusual events that happened when you were working at Hanford that kind of stand out in your mind at all?
Well, I happen to be a trained accident investigator, and I had to go to school and learn all this kind of stuff, and I probably investigated more accidents than anybody ever has at Hanford. And but we've had fatalities, and we had big spreads of contamination. We have several things that caused it. Plus, we also responded to off-site accidents, and I had what we call a radiological assistant team that reported to me, and I went out on those where, if it's there was trucks that would spill radioactive material, where there was this is kind of a little odd. I probably shouldn't mention it, but you'll appreciate it. But we had a truck of uranium billets overturned on a Lolo Pass, and these billets are, weight 15, 20 pounds, but there's hundreds of them in this truck. Those things went all over the highway up in here in Montana. I responded to that one, and one of the things that I was never trained on was guns. But while we were up there, probably about a week, recovering all of those billets that spilled, because they all had to be accounted for, and everything, because it was very strict on that. But we were out from town, out on this pass someplace, and somebody had to sit in the truck with a gun at night to make sure nothing came, anybody came from the highway or anything like that, Well, they gave me a big shotgun. I don't remember what kind of gun. I couldn't have shot that damn thing if I'd had to, and I still can't. But that was kind of humorous. But, we couldn't have the guy that could shoot be there all the time. So we all spent about 3 or 4 hours a night out there by ourselves.
How long were you out there?
We were out there a couple of weeks. But I responded to lots of the worst, probably the most one that I responded to as the team captain was we had a spread of contamination at the University of Washington at their reactor, and actually again there was some plutonium that came from Hanford that they were analyzing up there, and there was a spill. And the reactor at the University of Washington was greatly contaminated with plutonium. And I had a team. I had 3 or 4 people that went up with me to respond to that. And we were there 2 or 3 weeks there helping them get that all in. And we did. We got it all cleaned up. But there was some minor depositions. But boy, if that thing would happen now, the way it's anti-nuclear, it would be horrible. But this happened to be in spring break when all of the kids were away. So we lucked out on that thing, but we all had to wear protective clothing that 2 or 3 weeks while we're doing that. But I was the team leader on that particular accident.
Do you remember what sort of the time period was when that happened? Around what year that might have been?
Oh gosh, I can't remember that. But I responded to probably 30 or 40 spills and so on all over the country, in Oregon, Washington. And then we had spills in Oregon, that we had to go down to, because at that time the state didn't have people for that function to overlook at that. So we did their work for them, and I did that for, like I say, about 4 or 5 years.
So did you usually respond if it was like material that had come from Hanford?
No, it could be anything.
Could be anything. Okay.
Be anything. I love the job and I love the people because I like people, but it was so much travel. I was always gone from Hanford.
Yeah. So that was probably one of the more challenging aspects for you, was just all the travel.
Yeah, it was. And we had young children, and it seemed like I couldn't go out and come back. There wasn't a million things broke. So that's the way it went.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about President Kennedy's visit in 1963. If you went to that day, or
I did.
have any memories about that?
Well, I got two memories. I got a call after he was after that article was in the paper, you know, from the Seattle. No, she was from I think public relations firm down here, or one of them. That asked me about it, you know. So I told them everything I knew. So I told them about this one friend of ours that happened to get up and shake Kennedy's hand. Well, of course, they were interested more in that than they were in what I had to say. You know, so the big article in the paper, he gives his report, and he mentioned my name. No, I didn't care. But my son-in-law was there when they called too, and they quoted him in the article and everything. But for me, no, I wasn't looking. I wasn't really looking for my name to be any place. Yes, I was out there. It was of course, it was in the fall when he's here. Not long before he was assassinated, but it was such a hot day, and I think all of Richland went out to it. There was just car after car going out to that area, and some of them boiling over from the heat and all this kind of stuff. But it was a very, very excellent program. Mm-hmm.
So as you look back at your years working at Hanford, how many was it? 30?
Yeah.
Something like that?
About, it's 30 something, about 36. It was 36.
Well, as you look back at those 36 years, overall, how would you assess Hanford as a place to work?
Well, I thought it was excellent, very safety conscious. It couldn't have, it couldn't, in my aspect, been a safer place to live in my life than I did it here at Hanford. And like I say, I worked in all of the reactors. I worked in the separations plants and in everything, and it was interesting. It was I think, rewarding. The fact that you could clean up stuff, and so it makes me real. We had such excellent facilities out here at that time, but all those buildings are gone and torn down, and they could have been used for so many things, now, and I think that was a big mistake. But they didn't ask me.
Well, is there anything I haven't asked you about, or that you think would be important to share or talk about?
Well, I don't know. I think you might want to look at my submittal on the Parker Foundation on that thing and see what I said at that time and the answer to their questions and so on. It went well, and I just feel so fortunate to have been here all this time and be so lucky and still be here. I'm the luckiest guy in the world, and I'm very happy that I was at Hanford. I've got several awards while I was here for my work. One of them I do want to show you because I'm really probably real pleased. But I was elected a fellow in the National Health Physics Society. I received awards, several from. I was president of our local chapter of the Health Physics Society. I received several awards from those people. I was really well thought of while I was here at Hanford, and I was well pleased.
So, were you involved in the Parker Foundation as well?
Yes, I've been on. I still am.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about that, like how you got involved with that, or?
I was asked to join it by Dr. Bear, who is still there, and I know you know that Ron Catherine. Everybody knows Ron Catherine. Well, I play cribbies with Ron Catherine every Wednesday. At my house now. We play cribbies, and I just think he's such a great person, and such a great health physicist. I was so lucky to know him. And they asked me to join, and I've been real active until this business with my wife, which I took a leave of absence, and I haven't been able to go there because I can't leave my wife. But I still pay my dues and go there, and it's been a good organization.
Well, I want to thank you for coming today in this cold weather and coming to let us talk to you. And then maybe we could get a shot of your award that you brought in.
Oh, okay.